So today I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I've learned over the years in my career, some of the recent challenges that I've been facing with clients that I work with, and to share a specific study that my team and I developed using really cutting-edge visual data techniques to really get underneath and understand some new truths that customers want us as content providers and marketers to know about them. But I thought I'd start off just by telling you a little bit about myself. This is where I grew up. Beautiful, small, lovely, probably quite historical. So in fact, the coronation throne for, you might have guessed where I'm from by now, for the kings and queens of England is in Westminster Abbey. And the stone which sits underneath that throne was stolen from my hometown. And there's still a great deal of bitterness 700 years later. In fact, so much that one group actually went and stole it back and then eventually had to re-gift it to the royalty. You might think, what an amazing place to grow up. But in fact, it pretty much looked like this 340 days of the year. Not quite as lovely as we'd all like to think. Now, bearing in mind, small, historical town looks like this. As soon as you could walk, you were pretty much forced to do this. You were forced to eat this more than you might possibly want to. And this is the kind of marriage potential that you had in town. So just to be really clear, I was nice. And you'll note that he's not observing the traditional method of wearing the kilt. So what could a girl do? I persuaded my parents that getting a really good education as far away from home as possible was exactly the right thing to do. So I spent 4 years studying geography, anthropology, and sociology, or at least that's what I told my parents. I actually spent 4 years working as a barmaid in Camden Palace, serving beer warm, because that's how we do it in England, to the likes of Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, owned by Steve Strange at the time. And all I was doing was funding my ability to go here, which was the Limelight, which is my favorite club in London. So eventually, the International Bank of Parents closed me down and said, you've got 2 choices, get a job or come home. So I decided that actually getting a worldview was much more important. So I actually set out and managed to kind of work my way around the world for about 18 months. But then again, the International Bank of Parents closed me down. And again, come home or get a job. So I chose the most expensive city in the world, which I love, for my first place. Now, hands up anyone who remembers the beauty of the 5.5-inch floppy disk. Oh, fabulous, my crowd. And with the magnificent 1.67 kilobytes of storage. The first piece of research work I ever did used one of these things, which is an IBM punch card. So I'm just telling you that I trained in the very, very early days of research and insight. And I kind of worked my way up through all of this kind of nonsense. I spent 10 years really hardcore training with some of the biggest kind of research and insights businesses. Then I decided I wasn't really suitable for kind of working for the man. So I decided to become the woman. I set up my own business in 1998, grew that to have offices in Sydney, London, Seattle, and Amsterdam, of course. And during that time, I managed to pop out a couple of those. That's not their beer, that is mine. I managed to run off and do this. Let's not haggle about the order in which it happened. And I found myself selling my business, interestingly, not to another research company, not to a marketing agency, but to a software business. Because this was the point at which insight and learning and data really came together. And software businesses worked out that they needed people to make sense of the data that they were collecting. And they needed people to build intuitive tools that allowed them to access all of that brilliant data which was being created by the customers and prospects that we wanted. So now I find myself living here. Again, incredibly beautiful. Again, looks a lot more like this. Okay, so what have you learned about me in this? We've known each other for a minute and a half, maybe. What do you think you know about me? Yep. Yep. I was so at home this morning. Okay, great. So some of those things are true. Some of them might be true. But in that minute and a half, you've made some kind of judgments about who I am, what I stand for, and what you think I bring to the world. So I don't know if any of you know this guy, Robert Evans. He's a movie producer. He was Harvey Weinstein before Harvey Weinstein lived. And he's actually the producer of some of my favorite films, which is the Godfather series. And this is a great documentary. So one of the things I always try to do in these presentations, if you don't remember anything else, I'm going to give you some good film recommendations and some good book recommendations. If you get a chance to watch this documentary, do. He is a very irreverent individual. And this is one of my favorite quotes from the film. He's about to be fired by another studio mogul, which happens to him all the time. And they're talking about something that happened that really pushed over the line. And he said, look, in this really kind of, gangster kind of voice, he says, there are 3 sides to every story. Your side, my side, and the truth. No one's lying. Memories shared self each differently. And I think this is such an important idea that as content creators and marketers, we need to really recognize today. Because you can never know the real truth about any customer or any prospect that you're working for. But it's your job as marketers to see that from many, many different sides to make sure that anything that you are producing is truly engaging and relevant to them. So I'm going to talk very quickly today, because that's what I do. We're going to talk about some key trends that are important. I'm going to talk a little bit about the study. I'm going to just give you some highlights, but I'll give you a link at the end of the day where you can get the full study if you want to. And then I'll finish up with some practical guidance around how to take some of the things we talk about today back into your work practice. Who knows this story? Anyone? Okay. Excellent. Do you want to just tell a little bit about it? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's a fable that appears in many, particularly in Eastern kind of cultures, where there are 6 blind men who live in a village. Someone comes excitedly running through the village saying, oh, there's an elephant in the village. And the 6 blind men went, oh, we've never seen an elephant. I wonder what an elephant looks like. I wonder what it is. So they decide to go and look at the elephant. So one of the 6 blind men holds its tail and goes, oh, elephants are like rope. Another one kind of strokes its legs and says, oh, elephants are like columns. One feels its ears and says, oh, elephants are like fans. And all 6 of them had a very different way of describing the elephant. And they got into this huge fight about who was right. And then a wise man came along and said, hang on, guys. Each one of you is right, but you're only right about one part of the elephant. So the really important thing as content marketers is actually when you're thinking about the customer that you're writing for or the strategy that you're developing, is that you know about the multi-dimensional things. So one of the challenges with being a data person is it's so easy to come in with your view. So if you are someone who works in customer service, you can always see the customer service problem in a data set. If you're someone that works in brand, you can always see the brand problem. But the reality is that really effective relationships with customers and experiences that you build for them have to understand every single piece of the elephant. And what I'm going to talk about really for the rest of the day is how to get to all these different pieces. Okay, some of the really important trends that I've seen over the last few years that I think are really impacting certainly how I do my work is that it used to be a lot about this idea of satisfying or delighting your customers, finding those little moments and giving them something that's going to make them feel special. Just out of interest, what do you think the most valuable commodity is for people today? 100%. And the fact that we're all doing more and more and more every day means that there's less and less time for you to get your message across. So really effective brands and really effective businesses are those that focus on the idea of minimizing effort. So everything you write, is it easy to consume? Everything you write, can I relate to immediately? And that kind of leads on to the second trend. If you think about it, value used to be a really simple trade-off. I spent my many early days doing various equations about the cost-benefit analysis of doing business with a company. Now I'm very much focused on how much mental energy do people have to expend in order to do business with you, to consume your content, and to understand your message. So it's about this idea of thinking about how to be really easy and how to be really resonant in order to get people to engage. So again, you'll hear me say some things about data, but all disclosure, I absolutely love data. I am a data geek. Give me as much of it as you can. So I spent a lot of my career thinking about CRM. You know, it was going to solve all of our marketing problems in the world. I would actually argue that in today's society, it's not about you managing customer relationships. It's about customers managing relationships with you, because the power of data has changed. That means the paradigm has changed, and marketing and content production needs to change as a result as well. Again, when you're thinking at a brand level, and I think with content production, this is particularly important. It used to be that alignment with brands was all about, what are the tools that you give me? How do you make me do business? What are the things that you've got to offer? More and more, and particularly as millennials and Gen Z move through our kind of main cohorts, relationships with brands are actually about purpose and passion. It's finding companies that share your values are the things that are going to make a difference to who you choose to do business with and who you're prepared to engage around content and marketing with. And finally, the biggest trend that I'm observing is that it used to be that all of us marketers were about marketing to the one. And I think particularly through the millennial generation, and without question, if you've just seen the Twitch presentation, what that woman set out is an absolutely great example of a tribe. And more, when people are consuming media and consuming content, they're doing it in a tribal way. Who knows who this is? The picture on the... Yeah. Who considers themselves to be part of the Game of Thrones clan? Okay. So this is a classic example. Game of Thrones, the most successful, without question, TV franchise. And why that happened was really interesting, and I work with HBO quite a lot. And what they did when Game of Thrones came along is they realized that actually there was a whole tribe out there already who loved the books. And that tribe who loved the books were online in communities. That tribe that were in those communities went to, to meetings, and they talked and they explored with each other. So what they did is, rather than trying to drag the fans over, they created an environment around the Game of Thrones show that just allowed that tribe to come and be. And one of the really important things when you think about how you market and how you deliver content stories is think about that tribe. Don't try to influence it, don't try to drive it, but be really aware that if you can create an environment which supports, which advocates and amplifies that tribe, then you're looking at Game of Thrones. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the tribal stuff. This is a project that my team and I did working with Mazda. And anyone work in automotive or has ever had an automotive client? Okay. So one of the things that you'll know about automotive is it's the most regimented industry in the world. There's very standard customer buying models. There's very standardized methods of doing research with them. Everybody runs car clinics. And it's very difficult to do something different. So Mazda's always been a challenger brand in the business. And they came to us and said, we want to be a premium brand, and we want to attract very affluent millennials. So getting back into that kind of tribe idea. So we followed the standard rules, and we set up a series of focus groups talking about, who they are. And in the very first focus group, we were talking about, what does it mean to have a premium experience with a car and with an automotive business? And this guy stood up, and he said, I think telling anyone that they can have a premium experience based on how much they earn is bollocks. And everyone behind the glass went, I could actually hear it. And actually, that message was completely reinforced throughout all the initial groups. And what we learned is when you looked at this affluent millennials as a tribe, they rejected all of that notion of premium. And as we tried to push the conversations further, what they told us is that everybody deserves a premium experience. It doesn't matter who you are. And that means when you're thinking about your content, when you're thinking about the car that you deliver, then you should be focusing on everybody as your most valuable customer. So I pushed and pushed and pushed on what this, what could it be? And then what started coming out from the conversations was these little moments where you really loved your car. These little moments in your life where your car facilitated something. People talked about picking someone up on their first date. They talked about kissing them in their car when they took them home again. They talked about that moment when you leave home with all your stuff in the back of the car. And they talked about these moments of joy. So what that allowed us to do is to actually rip up all of those traditional buyer journeys and think about how, as marketers, can we be in those moments of joy? How can we recognize them? How can we replay those to these millennials? Because this is the way that we can connect with them. And that really was that one person standing up and putting me right was the kind of the beginning of the Joy of Driving campaign that Mazda kind of builds its business around today. But the really important thing is we assumed that because these millennials had some money, they wanted a premium experience. They put us right. And again, when you're thinking about your tribes, it's important that you really understand the things that truly matter to them. So I found myself more and more often in a similar situation as I did with Mazda, which is that I felt like I was going into projects with clients, kind of knowing that they weren't asking the right questions, that they weren't talking about the right issues for their audience groups. So I decided to actually do some of my own research. Once a researcher, always a researcher. And one of the tools that I use a lot is a social tool that's designed to explore visual language and linguistics together. And it's a machine learning platform. And this is what we used for the study. So we basically asked nearly 4,000 US consumers to post a photograph or source an image that represented a truth, an intrinsic truth that brands needed to know about them. And basically, I'll give you the kind of download address at the end if you want to read the full report. But the way that this works, it's kind of like Mechanical Turk, in that what happens is everyone posts an image, then those are peer-reviewed, they're voted up or down, and then you can look quantitatively at meanings from words and meanings from pictures. So it's a very different way. And if you think part of the reason that I started the presentation the way I did today is I actually didn't tell you a single thing about myself. I didn't tell you where I lived. I didn't tell you what I did. I did all of that through pictures, and you all managed to pick up particular things, which when you've known someone for a minute and a half, some of the things that you said about me are actually things that normally take a long time for people to know. So the idea behind this study is really to get to something different by using a different data set and thinking a different way. So I'm just going to share some of the headlines. So much as the person in the audience said, the most important commodity today for everybody is time. The number one message was, don't waste my time. Brands need to know that time is important to me. And when we were doing the visual analysis, the most frequently recorded imagery within the photographs was clocks, watches, and calendars. This I relate to. My truth is busy mum. Any brand that can show me how to shortcut, how to automate part of my life, I will love you forever. Again, a very core message. We saw lots and lots of images of people juggling, of really busy environments, of people running, and there was that real sense from consumers that time and efficiency is what matters. That sounds a little hard and cold. And actually, the other thing that they said, and what was interesting is, I spoke earlier about this notion of CRM. What CRM has done is made it very easy for us to make assumptions about people. So what the consumers are saying is, I actually understand. Marketing isn't a secret to consumers anymore. But what these people are saying is, still look at me as an individual.